Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Narratives Academy. We're so happy you're here. Today, we're going to take a journey back in time. We'll explore the life of Joseph Stalin, a very important person from the 20th century. He was a leader who made big changes in his country, and his actions affected the whole world. We'll learn about his life, from when he was a little boy to when he became a powerful leader. We'll see the choices he made, some good and some bad, and how those choices changed history. This is a great chance for you to practice your English. We've used easy words and simple sentences, so you can understand everything. You'll learn new words and improve your listening skills while listening to a really interesting story. Let us begin with his early life.
Chapter 1. Early Life. Joseph Stalin was born on December 18, 1878. The place was a small town called Gori in Georgia, which was part of the Russian Empire at that time. His birth name was Iosif Vissarionovich Zugashvili. That's a long name. Imagine a small, dusty town with simple houses and hard-working people. Iosif's father was a shoemaker, and his mother worked washing clothes. Life was tough. They didn't have much money. Iosif was a small and thin boy. He had a difficult childhood. His father, named Vissarion, was a very strong man, but he often drank too much. When he drank, he became angry. He would sometimes hit Iosif and his mother. This made Iosif feel scared and sad. But Iosif's mother, Ketevin, loved him very much. She worked very hard to take care of him. She wanted him to have a good education and a better life than she had. She was a very religious woman, and she took Iosif to church. She wanted him to become a priest. Iosif was a smart boy. He liked to learn. He went to a small school in Gori. The school was very simple. The children sat on wooden benches, and they wrote on slates. He learned to read and write. He was good at his lessons. Then, he went to a religious school in Tbilisi. Tbilisi was a bigger city, and the school was stricter. He learned about religion and history. He sang in the church choir. He was a good student, and his mother was very proud of him. But Iosif also saw a lot of unfairness in the world. He saw that many people were poor and treated badly. He started to think about why some people had a lot of money and others had nothing. He started to question the rules of society. He also had a few friends. They played games in the street. They ran and jumped and had fun. But even when he played, Iosif was serious. He was always thinking. He was a leader even as a child. Life in Gori was hard. The weather could be very hot or very cold. People worked long hours in the fields or in small shops. They didn't have many things, but they were strong and they helped each other. Iosif grew up in this world. He saw the hard work and the unfairness. He learned to be strong and determined. Chapter 2. Becoming a Revolutionary. As Iosif grew older, he started to think more deeply about the world around him. He saw that many people were poor and treated unfairly. He began to ask, why? He wanted to find answers. He started reading books about new ideas. He discovered the writings of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. These books talked about changing society. They explained how workers were treated unfairly and how things could be different. Iosif was very interested in these ideas. He felt like he had found a way to understand the world. He joined a secret group of revolutionaries. These were people who wanted to change the government. They wanted to make things better for the working people. They met in secret places to talk and plan. Iosif was very active in this group. He was a good speaker, and he was not afraid to share his ideas. He started to organize protests and strikes. These were ways for workers to show that they were unhappy. They would stop working and march in streets. Iosif helped to plan these actions. He was brave and determined. He believed that he was fighting for a good cause. He changed his name to Stalin. Stalin means man of steel in Russian. He wanted to show that he was strong and powerful. He wanted people to know that he was serious about changing the world. This new name was a symbol of his new life. Stalin's revolutionary activities got him into trouble with the police. The police were working for the government, and they did not like people who wanted to change things. They arrested Stalin many times. He was sent to prison in Siberia. Siberia is a very cold and remote place in Russia. It is far away from everything. Life in Siberia was very hard. It was cold and the work was difficult. But even in prison, Stalin continued to work for his cause. He talked to other prisoners about revolutionary ideas. He wrote letters and articles. He never gave up. He learned to be patient. He learned to be careful. He learned to be strong. He learned to survive in difficult situations. These experiences made him a very tough and determined person. When he was not in prison, he traveled around Russia. He met with other revolutionaries. He organized meetings and gave speeches. He was always working to build the revolutionary movement. He lived a dangerous life. He was always at risk of being arrested or killed, but he believed that what he was doing was important. He was willing to take risks to make the world a better place. Stalin's early life as a revolutionary was a time of learning and growing. He learned about politics and power. He learned how to organize people and how to fight for his beliefs. These experiences shaped him into the leader he would become. Chapter 3: The Russian Revolution. In 1917, a big change happened in Russia. This was the Russian Revolution. It was a time of great trouble and big changes. People were very unhappy. They were tired of the old government led by the Tsar. The Tsar was like a king. He had a lot of power, but many people were poor and had no rights. They were hungry and angry. They wanted a better life. World War I was happening then. Russia was fighting in the war, and many soldiers were dying. Food was scarce, and people were suffering. This made them even angrier. They started to protest in the streets. They wanted the war to end and the Tsar to step down. Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Party led the revolution. They were a group of revolutionaries who believed in communism. Communism is an idea that all people should be equal and the government should control everything. Lenin was a strong leader, and he gave the people hope. Stalin was one of Lenin's important helpers. He worked hard to organize the Bolsheviks and get support for the revolution. He was good at planning and making decisions. The revolution happened in two parts. First, in February 1917, the Tsar was forced to give up his power. This was called the February Revolution. Then, in October 1917, the Bolsheviks took control of the government. This was the October Revolution. The Bolsheviks promised the people peace, land, and bread. They said they would end the war, give land to the farmers, and make sure everyone had enough food. Many people believed them. After the revolution, Russia became the Soviet Union. It was a new country with a new government. It was based on communist ideas. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin and Stalin, were now in charge. The revolution was a very big change for Russia. It changed the country forever. It was a time of excitement and hope, but also of violence and uncertainty. Many people were killed in the fighting. Stalin played a big role in this change. He helped to make the revolution happen. He helped to build the new Soviet Union. He was becoming a very powerful person. Chapter 4: Taking Power. After Lenin died in 1924, there was a big question: who would lead the Soviet Union? Many people in the Communist Party wanted to be the new leader. There was a power struggle, a fight for control. Stalin was very clever. He was patient and worked slowly and carefully. He didn't rush. He knew how to use his position in the Communist Party to his advantage. He was a general secretary, which meant he controlled many important jobs and decisions. He started to make alliances. This means he made friends with some people and promised to help them. He supported people who supported him. He was good at making deals. He was also good at making enemies. He got rid of people who disagreed with him. He moved them to less important jobs or sent them away. One of his biggest rivals was Leon Trotsky. Trotsky was a very smart and popular leader. He was one of the main leaders of the revolution. But Stalin was better at playing politics. He slowly took away Trotsky's power. He used propaganda, which means spreading information to make people think a certain way. He made Trotsky look like an enemy of the people. Stalin was very good at controlling information. He controlled the newspapers and radio. He made sure that people only heard what he wanted them to hear. He made himself look strong and important. He made his enemies look weak and bad. He used fear to control people. People were afraid to disagree with him. They were afraid of being arrested or sent to labor camps. He created a system where people were always watching each other. By the late 1920s, Stalin had become the most powerful person in the Soviet Union. He had removed all his rivals. He had complete control of the Communist Party and the government. He was now the leader of the country. He changed the way the Soviet Union was run. He made it a dictatorship. This means that he had all the power and the people had very little. He made all the important decisions. He didn't allow anyone to disagree with him. He was very determined. He had a clear goal to make the Soviet Union a strong and powerful country. He was willing to do whatever it took to achieve his goal. He was very ambitious. He wanted to be the most powerful leader in the world. Stalin's rise to power was a long and difficult process. He used his intelligence, his patience, and his ruthlessness to achieve his goal. He was a master of political manipulation. He knew how to use people and how to control them. Chapter 5. Building a Strong Nation. Stalin wanted to transform the Soviet Union into a modern, powerful nation. He believed that only a strong country could survive in a world full of competition and conflict. So he launched a series of ambitious plans called the 5-year plans. These plans were like big projects for the whole country. They focused on building up industry. Stalin wanted to make the Soviet Union less dependent on other countries for important goods. He wanted to produce everything within the Soviet Union. One of the main goals was to increase the production of heavy industry. This meant building factories that made things like steel, iron, and machines. These things were important for building more factories, bridges, and other infrastructure. The government invested a lot of money in these projects. New industrial cities were built from scratch. Places that were once small villages became big industrial centers. People moved from the countryside to these cities to work in the factories. This rapid urbanization changed the face of the Soviet Union. Stalin also wanted to modernize agriculture. He wanted to make farming more efficient and productive. He introduced a policy of collectivization, which meant combining small farms into large collective farms. The idea was that larger farms would be more efficient and produce more food. However, this policy was met with resistance from many farmers, who were reluctant to give up their land and traditional ways of farming. The government used force to implement collectivization, leading to widespread disruption and suffering. The rapid industrialization and collectivization efforts had mixed results. On one hand, the Soviet Union made significant progress in building its industrial base. It became a major producer of steel, coal, and other industrial goods. On the other hand, the forced collectivization of agriculture led to a devastating famine in the early 1930s, causing millions of deaths. The 5-year plans also emphasized education and science. Stalin believed that a modern nation needed a well-educated workforce and advanced scientific research. Many new schools and universities were built, and scientific research was encouraged. Stalin's efforts to build a strong nation had a profound impact on the Soviet Union. He transformed the country from a largely agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. However, this transformation came at a great human cost, with millions of people suffering and dying under his policies. Chapter 6: World War II and Stalin. In 1939, a terrible war began. This was World War II. It was the biggest war in history. Many countries fought each other. One of the main enemies was Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler. At first, the Soviet Union, led by Stalin, did not fight Germany. Stalin made a deal with Hitler. They agreed not to attack each other. This was called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. But in 1941, Hitler broke the deal. He attacked the Soviet Union. This was a big surprise. The German army was very strong. They moved quickly into Soviet territory. The Soviet Union was in great danger. Many soldiers and civilians were killed. Many cities were destroyed. The Soviet people suffered very much. Stalin knew he had to fight back. He called on the Soviet people to defend their country. He gave speeches and made plans. He worked very hard to organize the army. The Soviet Union fought very bravely. They fought in very cold weather. They fought against a very strong enemy. Many soldiers gave their lives. The Battle of Stalingrad was a very important battle. It lasted for many months. It was a very hard fight. The Soviet Union won this battle. This was a turning point in the war. The Soviet Union helped to push the German army back. They fought all the way to Berlin, the capital of Germany. They helped to defeat Hitler and end the war in Europe. The Soviet Union played a very important role in winning World War II. They lost many people, but they helped to save the world from Hitler. Stalin was seen as a hero by many people in the Soviet Union. They believed he had led them to victory. But the war also had a big cost. Many cities were destroyed. Many people were killed. The Soviet Union was very damaged. After the war, the Soviet Union became even more powerful. It became one of the two superpowers in the world. World War II changed the world. It changed the Soviet Union. Stalin's leadership during this time had a big impact on history. Chapter 7: Family and Relationships. Stalin's life as a leader was very busy and powerful, but his family life was complicated and often sad. He had 2 wives and 3 children, but his relationships with them were not always happy. His first wife was Kato Svanidze. They got married when Stalin was still a young revolutionary. They loved each other very much. They had 1 son, Yakov. Sadly, Kato died very young, just a few years after they got married. This made Stalin very sad. Later, Stalin married Nadezhda Aliyeva. They had 2 children, Vasily and Svetlana. Nadezhda was much younger than Stalin. She was a strong and independent woman, but she also suffered from emotional problems. Their relationship was often difficult. Stalin's relationship with his children was also complicated. He was often distant and harsh. He was very busy with his work, and he didn't spend much time with them. He was a strict father, and he expected a lot from his children. His oldest son, Yakov, had a difficult life. He didn't have a close relationship with Stalin. During World War II, Yakov was captured by the Germans. Stalin was offered a chance to trade Yakov for a German prisoner, but he refused. Yakov died in a German prisoner of war camp. This was a great tragedy for Stalin, but he did not show his emotions publicly. His son Vasily became a pilot in the Soviet Air Force. He was a good pilot, but he also had problems with alcohol. He was often in trouble. Stalin was sometimes angry with him, but he also tried to help him. His daughter Svetlana was very different. She was sensitive and intelligent. She had a better relationship with Stalin than her brothers did, but even she had problems with him. Later, she left the Soviet Union and wrote a book about her father. In her book, she talked about how difficult it was to be Stalin's daughter. Stalin was not a warm or loving father. He was a very powerful leader, and he was used to controlling everything. He tried to control his family, too. This made his relationships difficult. He was a very private man. He didn't show his emotions easily. He was suspicious of people, even his own family. He was always worried about enemies. Even though he was a powerful leader, Stalin had a lonely life. He didn't have many close friends, and his family relationships were troubled. His personal life was very different from his public image. Chapter 8, The Dark Side. While Stalin built a powerful nation, his rule also had a very dark side. He was a dictator, which means he had complete control. He did not allow anyone to disagree with him. He created a system of fear. People were afraid to speak out against him. They were afraid of being arrested or sent to labor camps. These camps were very harsh places where people worked very hard and suffered. Stalin was very suspicious. He thought that many people were trying to hurt him. He saw enemies everywhere, even among his closest friends and colleagues. This led to a period called the Great Purge. During the Great Purge, many people were arrested and killed. They were accused of being enemies of the state. Many of these accusations were false. People were afraid to trust anyone. Millions of people were sent to labor camps in Siberia. These camps were very cold and difficult places. People worked long hours and had very little food. Many people died in these camps. Stalin's secret police, the NKVD, were very powerful. They arrested people without any reason. They tortured people to make them confess to crimes they didn't commit. He controlled all the information. He controlled the newspapers, radio, and books. He made sure that people only heard what he wanted them to hear. He used propaganda to make people believe that he was always right. He changed history books to make himself look good. He erased the names of people who disagreed with him. He made it seem like he was the only one who had helped to make the revolution. He was very cruel. He didn't care about the suffering of others. He was only interested in power. He made many bad decisions that caused a lot of suffering. For example, his policy of collectivization caused a famine that killed millions of people. His rule was a time of great fear and suffering. Many people lost their lives, their families, and their freedom. His actions had a lasting impact on the Soviet Union. The fear and distrust that he created lasted for many years. It is important to remember the dark side of Stalin's rule. We must learn from the past and work to prevent such things from happening again. Chapter 9, Legacy and Impact. Joseph Stalin died in 1953. His death marked the end of a long and difficult period in the history of the Soviet Union. But his influence didn't end. His legacy, or what he left behind, is very complicated. Stalin's impact on the Soviet Union and the world was huge. He transformed a largely agricultural country into an industrial superpower. He built factories, modernized farming, and strengthened the military. This helped the Soviet Union become a major player in world affairs. He also played a crucial role in defeating Nazi Germany in World War II. The Soviet Union's sacrifices and victories were key to ending the war in Europe. This made him a hero to many people at the time. However, his methods were very harsh. He ruled with fear and violence. Millions of people suffered and died under his rule. He created a system of terror that affected every aspect of life in the Soviet Union. His policies had a lasting impact on the Soviet Union's economy and society. The focus on heavy industry and military strength came at the expense of consumer goods and individual freedoms. People had little choice in what they could buy or how they lived. Stalin's legacy also extended beyond the Soviet Union. He promoted communism and supported communist movements around the world. This contributed to the Cold War, a period of tension and competition between the Soviet Union and the United States. His model of authoritarian rule influenced other leaders and countries. Some saw him as a strong leader who achieved great things, while others saw him as a cruel dictator who caused immense suffering. Even today, people have different opinions about Stalin. Some remember him for his role in industrializing the Soviet Union and defeating Nazi Germany. Others remember him for the millions of deaths and the suppression of human rights. His legacy reminds us of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of individual freedoms. It shows how a single person can have a massive impact on a world, for both good and bad. Chapter 10, Remembering Stalin. Joseph Stalin was a complex and contradictory figure. He was a revolutionary, a leader, and a dictator. His life story is a reminder of the power of individuals to change history, for good or for bad. It is important to remember the past, to learn from it, and to strive for a better future. Stalin's story teaches us about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of human rights. We hope you've learned something new about Joseph Stalin. Thank you for listening.